ready to embark on an exciting journey into the heart of the Pokemon trading card game's newest set, Paradox Rift, where we're about to uncover a whole new world of possibilities. This groundbreaking set is sending shockwaves through the community, and for good reason. The Paradox mechanic is here, bringing both future and ancient Pokemon into the mix, some having the potential to reshape the entire meta. It's a fusion of timelines, and we're here to guide you through it. In this video, we'll be helping you navigate the new set and unveil the must-have staples that every player should be adding to their collection, while taking a closer look at those hidden gems with competitive potential, perfect for those crucial tech cards, and just for powering up engines of future powerhouse decks. And of course, we'll be giving you the lowdown on those intriguing cards that seem like they have potential, might not be immediate meta definers, but are definitely worth keeping an eye on, especially if you happen to pull them from a booster pack. But the excitement doesn't stop there. Some cards in this set have the potential to create entirely new decks, catering to a wide array of playstyles. So if something in this set catches your eye and maybe lines up with your unique approach to the game, we've got the insights you need to make the right choices to add those cards to your collection. For our devoted GLC enthusiast, our Gym Leader Challenge, if you're not familiar with the format, towards the end of the video, we'll be diving into the amazing additions for that format too. Paradox Rift will shake things up in GLC, and I can't wait to see how these new cards will spice up your battles. So buckle up and get ready to explore the Rift, where past and future collide with the whirlwind of new possibilities. We're starting off our journey with the staples, so let's dive right in. Well, if you've been around on social media at all the last 2-3 months, you'll probably know what Jake Gearhart's Boogey Man is, and that's Iron-Valiant EX. It's got the attack Amp You very much, does 120 damage for lightning and 3 colorless energy, and if you take a knockout with it, you're going to be taking an additional prize. At first, you might be thinking, well, it's a lightning Pokemon, why is it a staple? Well, the fact that there's 3 colorless energy in the attack means you can be kind of splashing this into any deck. Baxcalibur can charge it up, Lugia can charge it up, you just need to run 1 copy of Luminous Energy and put a bunch of water energy on it, or for Lugia, put 3 special energy and then a basic lightning energy on there, and you can take some pretty cheeky prizes. Definitely going to shake things up. The fact that you can take extra prizes has always been a very powerful play in the TCG. Like when Arceus Dialga Palkia was a thing, it dominated the format once it found a good attacker. Iron-Valiant EX just being that good attacker that can be splashed into any deck, yeah, it's definitely got meta potential. The other ones I'm going to recommend are Natu and Xatu, which at first people might kind of look at this and be like, well, why are they in here? Well, Xatu's ability lets you attach a psychic energy card from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon and draw 2 cards. So similar to Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, which saw a lot of play and was pretty meta-defining, that also had a solid attack to pair with it. Xatu, not so much, but the fact that you can just kind of splash this into decks, give yourself draw power, you can be paying colorless attack costs, like you could run Iron-Valiant EX with Xatu's if you wanted. Gets you draw power, gets Iron-Hands charged up. You would need to have like 3 of these in play and then just attach a lightning energy, but definitely seems like it has potential and will be a new sort of engine for decks. Like just take a look at Kirlia. It discards 1 card to draw 2 cards. Xatu attaches 1 energy to draw 2 cards. That definitely seems like a better benefit, so decks that are running that, Xatu could be splashed in there. It doesn't have the stage 2 that lets you get energy from the discard or a supporter card from your deck, so isn't quite as powerful as the Gardevoir line, but once those kind of rotate out, Xatu will definitely be a great card to have in your back pocket. We're also seeing the introduction of Iron Bundle. It's got the Hyper Blower ability, and if this is on your bench, you can choose to discard it, and your opponent has to switch out their active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. So sort of like Escape Rope, except it's not impacting you. You can also search this out with Nest Ball. So it's a pretty good way just to have Guaranteed Gust, and definitely a good card to have in your collection. I'm also going to recommend Professor Churro's Scenario. You put one of your Pokemon into your hand. So it's effectively like Charon's Care, except you're not keeping all the cards attached to it. Charon's Care being limited to colorless Pokemon is kind of the trade-off there. This you can use on anything. It's an effective way just to heal off damage. So if you tanked a big hit and you're like, well, if I stay and play another turn, I'm going to get knocked out and give up 2 or 3 prizes, and I don't want to do that. I have another attacker set up on my bench. Just scoop that Pokemon up, comes into your hand, rebench the basic, or if it is a basic, just rebench it and start charging it up again. It's a great way to just add some healing and additional utility to effectively any deck. We're also getting a reprint of Counter Catcher, so if you're new to the game and don't have copies of this card from when it was in play during the Sun and Moon format, I'd recommend picking it up. If you're behind on prizes, you can use this item card to just gust up one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So similar to Boss's Orders, except it's an item card, not a supporter, so you can be using other supporter cards for your draw power or other utilities still. The other card I'm going to recommend everybody picks up is Earthen Vessel. Gonna say get probably 4 copies of this. It seems like a good card to just splash into everything. You do discard a card from your hand to use it, but you get to search your deck for 2 basic energy cards to put into your hand, so it's a great way just to guarantee energy acceleration. That Xatu we just talked about, you can get those psychic energy, attach them, draw more cards. That's pretty solid. For Baxcalibur decks, running this instead of Energy Search, it seems like a definite upgrade. Pretty much any deck can just be slashing this in there. Like if you're going to be running Energy Search, just switch it out for this now. You're getting 2 energy instead. You do have to discard a card, but having cards like Battle VIP Pass that are just kind of discard fodder mid to late game anyways though, like they're easy targets for this. That's it for the staples. So if you want to take a screenshot of this, this is what I'm thinking everybody does need to pick up at a minimum. What do you think of these staples though? Did I miss any or do you disagree with some? I know Natu and Xatu, some people are probably looking at it like, I don't know, Triple, maybe not, but trust me, they've definitely got potential. And next, we're going to take a look at the cards that have potential to just be entirely new decks coming out of this. I figure we cover the staples that everybody should get, and then you take a look at this and it's see what you want from this. You don't need to get every single copy of all of these cards. It's more so if some of these align with your playstyles, I'd recommend getting them. There's definitely some I would recommend over others, and we'll cover that as we go through them. First one we're going to talk about though is Garchomp EX. It's a Stage 2 Terra type EX Pokemon. So being a Terra type, it does have bench protection built into it. Gives up 2 prizes, 320 HP. It's a pretty bulky guy. The first attack, Hydrolander, does 160 damage, and you get to attach up to 3 fighting energy from your discard pile to your bench Pokemon in any way that you like. So you can be setting up other Garchomps or other attackers. The second attack, it has Sonic Dive, discards 2 energy from this Pokemon to do 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So it's a good way to just kind of snipe stuff. 160 damage on their first attack. It's not massive, but you're able to accelerate energy, set up other attackers is definitely a plus. And also you can be running it with Cheryl, so tank a hit, fully heal it, attach an energy, you're half hitting into stuff. Definitely seems like it has potential, and I know a lot of people are excited about this card, especially since it's a water type. You can play it with a Rita, you can get rare candies and this evolution and get it online pretty quickly. It'll be a cool one. I'm not 100% it'll redefine the meta, but it'll be a fun one to play. And next we'll be taking a look at Golisopod EX. It's an interesting hit and run Pokemon, similar to what it was as a GX. So it's got the attack Swinging Skedaddle, does 170 damage. You discard an energy from this Pokemon and switch it with one of your bench Pokemon. So you can be running it with things like, what comes to my mind is like Mimikyu or Klefki, and kind of be locking your opponent out of the game. So you switch into Mimikyu. If they're running Vs or EX Pokemon, they can't damage that. It forces them to find Gust to be able to hit you again. You can just be kind of chipping things with Golisopod and then hiding behind it. Or with Klefki, you can be going into that and shutting off their basic Pokemon abilities. So into like Lost Box or VMAX, shutting down their Genesect and their Comfeys can definitely be a powerful Pokemon, and does seem like it has some competitive potential. It's not really my style of deck though, but if you like that kind of thing, there you go. It's also a water type, so you can be running it with a Rita to search it out, get some item cards. It's definitely an interesting concept in there, and I'm sure someone will crack the code on it. So if you think it's you, let me know in the comments down below. And next up, we're going to be looking at something a little bit different. So the first part of this is Vanillix, which has the ability Frigid Room. Your opponent's Pokemon that have 40 HP or less remaining can't attack. So it just fully locks them out of the game. Sort of like Panic Mask, where it had to be attached to your Pokemon that if they had 40 or less health, they couldn't attack you. It's just if this is in play, if they have less than 40 health, they can't do anything. It's going to pair amazingly with Serena EX. It's a Terra Water Pokemon, so similar to Garchomp, can't be hit if it's on the bench. You can search it out with a Rita, you can get rare candy with it. Pretty consistent way to get set up. And it also has a 1 energy attack. So Icicle Soul, you put damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon until its remaining HP is 30. So combining that with the Vanillix, they're going to have less than 40 health. They can't attack you. You only need 1 energy to do this. If you tank a hit, you can Cheryl, you can reattach, you're in a great way. It's definitely an interesting deck to be made there. Like, as long as you can find some way to do that remaining 30 damage, like later in the game, maybe you're running it with Hisuian Braviary and just putting damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon that are already damaged. Gets around mana fees, pretty solid. So kind of keen to see what people come up with for this, and that's kind of where my head's at, is the Bird, Ice Cream Cone, and the Serena. Seems like a deck in and of itself. We're also getting a new Kingdra that seems like it's got potential to be an interesting new rogue deck. So you reveal the top 6 cards of your deck, and it's going to do 60 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each energy card you find there. You discard those energies, but then you shuffle all the other cards back into your deck. So as long as you're able to find a way to consistently get all your trainers and your Pokemon out, Kingdra can be doing some pretty massive damage, getting up to 360. For just 1 energy, that's not too bad. Also being a stage 2 water type, you can be running it with a Rita, get this, get a rare candy, get it online very quickly. Definitely got a cool concept to it, and kind of reminds me of the Chandelure we used to have, where it was like ditch the top 5 cards of your deck for each Pokemon you reveal there, do a big number. This is just the energy though, but you're not able to set up additional Pokemon with it, so it can be a little bit tricky, but effectively just needing to get this one thing online to be going, I feel like there's going to be an interesting deck to come out of that. And while we're on the topic of rogue decks, we've got another one coming out of this set, being the Simipour, Simisage, and Simisear, all having the Monkey Trio ability. If you have one of each of those monkeys in play, you ignore all colorless energy in the attack costs of those Pokemon. So Simipour having the attack Shower with Insults, it's going to do 50 damage to the active and 30 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, making it a solid spread type attacker. The Simisear has the attack Heat Tackle, doing 190 damage, but 30 damage to itself, so a great way to just directly hit your opponent. And Simisage having the Arm Thrust Needle, 100 damage during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from a Pokemon that have abilities, except for other Simisage. So it's a great way to kind of gatekeep into things. There's a lot of things that have abilities, for example, into Chin-Pao. Chin-Pao has an ability. You attack with Simisage, they have to gust around you or they can't damage you. They try and go into a Greninja or a Baxcalibur, or a Palkia, all of which have abilities, Simisage is completely invincible. Same with into Miraidon. Miraidon has an ability, Raikou has an ability, they'd have to go for Raichu, I guess. They have a way around it. So definitely an interesting concept, bit of monkey business to be had there. It's probably not going to be a competitive deck, but definitely one of those fun ones. So if you're looking for a kind of budget way to play the game, there's a deck concept to come out of that. Needing only just one color of the energy of their attacks, so one fire, one grass, one water to get them online, or using luminous energy, it's definitely a fairly budget-friendly deck with an interesting take. That's about it for the more so off-meta, or we'll say rogue decks. So into the first deck that I think that's going to have competitive potential coming out of this set is going to be Armarouge EX. So it's got the ability Crimson Armor. If this is at full health, it's going to take 80 less damage from attacks of your opponent's Pokemon, bringing its 260 health all the way up to 340. It is a stage 1 Pokemon, so you could be running it with Rigid Band, bulking it up a little bit more if you'd like, but I feel like there's some other item cards that are going to pair better with it. Since its attack Scorching Bazooka is going to start at a base of 40 damage, but then 40 more damage for each fire energy attached to this Pokemon. So you want to keep as many fire energy in play as you can, so running things like Experience Share on multiple Armarouge is going to keep the energy in play. You then have the Armarouge from Scarlet and Violet that you can just move fire energy from your bench Pokemon up to the active, so something gets knocked out, all that energy goes to your guys on the bench, you then push it up to the active, you just keep attackers in play, and especially with Crimson Armor, making Armarouge kind of bulky, you can be running switch cards and Cheryl, so one Armarouge takes a hit, you switch it to the bench, you move all the energy off the damage one to the active one, you play Cheryl, you heal the damage one, no energy gets discarded because the energy is now on the new attacker, and you just kind of loop around like that. So it seems like it's got some very powerful potential. Not to mention, since it's going to be doing damage based off the fire energy attached to it, you can be running it with the Charizard from Pokemon Go that makes every fire energy count as 2 fire energy on your Pokemon. So you're going to be doubling that damage up. You can be running it with things like Magma Basin as well to get energy from the discard and onto your bench, and then just push them up to the active with that Armarouge. So it definitely seems like it's got some powerful potential. The other really interesting card we're getting out of this set is Iron-Valiant EX. That seems like it can be a deck in and of itself thanks to its ability Tachyon Bits. Once during your turn, when this Pokemon moves from your bench to the active spot, you can put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So into small basic decks like Lost Box, if you could get 4 of these out in one turn, you're doing effectively 80 damage to something, you're knocking out a Comfey, and then you use the attack Laser Blade and knock something out in the active, you're in a good way. You can also just be setting up damage with all those damage pings, like those damage counters, you put them on something in the active, maybe it's a big bulky stage 2 EX Pokemon, effectively get 80 counters out and then go into it with Laser Blade, and then next turn you finish it off with more counters. You can be pairing it with something like Medicham V to be taking additional turns when you take knockouts. So yeah, there's definitely going to be some broken combos coming out with this card. It's also not a bad card just to add into decks to put some extra pressure. Like if you're 20 damage shy of knockouts, running an Iron-Valiant just to help you set up numbers is definitely a great option to be able to go into. The other really interesting deck coming out of the set is Gholdengo EX. With the ability Coin bonus, you get to draw a card. Just once per turn, draw a card. But if this isn't the active spot, you get to draw 2 instead. So if you have multiples of these in play, you can just be drawing as many cards as you want, potentially up to 8 if you're able to switch them all into the active and trigger the ability. More likely, you're going to be triggering the ability of 1 in the active and then 3 on the bench, getting you 5 cards each turn, which is pretty solid, especially since it's going to charge up the attack Make It Rain, which does a multiplier of 50, based off the amount of basic energy cards you choose to discard from your hand. So if you choose to discard 7 basic energy, you're doing 350 damage, you're knocking out like a Charizard EX, That's pretty solid, especially since you're able to draw 5 cards each turn. You just need ways to get those energy back. So Superior Energy Retrieval is a great way for it. That Earthen Vessel is a great way to get them into your hand. There's a lot of ways to power up Gholdengo EX, and it seems like it will be a powerhouse. The other great thing about this card, it's actually going to be free on PTCGL. It's going to be one of the free Battle Pass decks. So if you play online, you're just going to get this card right off the hop. I think you only get 2 copies of it, but as you play through the Battle Pass at like level 16, I think you get another, and then you get some more as you go through. So it'll be a great free deck to be able to get into if you do play online. And another Steel type has actually kind of got my interest here, being Aegislash. So it's got the ability Mysterious Shield. You get to prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V, which are, well, extremely relevant. Has 150 HP, so into other single prize decks, the ones that actually could be dealing damage to this, you're pretty bulky, you're hard to deal with, right? Like Lost Box trying to take you down with a Cramorant, they're going to take a couple of hits, but then you just use Hard Bashing and deal 120 damage to actually knock them out in one hit. You're in a pretty good way. The attack's damage isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon either, so if something like Alolan Vulpix V-Star, where they don't take damage from things with abilities, so they'd be like, well, I can't hurt you, but you can't hurt me, and then you just go, actually, I shred, and I hit you for weakness. It's pretty solid. It does also have an alternate evolution you can be going for, being Aegislash EX, which has the Peerless Edge attack, doing a multiplier of 70 damage for each of your prize cards that you've taken. So after you've taken 4 prize cards, you can be doing 280 damage for 1 energy. If you've taken 5 prize cards, 350, so after 4 prizes, you can be knocking out a V-Star in one shot, and after 5, you can take out a Stage 2 EX Pokemon. A very powerful inclusion for that deck, so I'd recommend picking up 4 copies of the single prizer and probably 1, maybe 2 copies of the EX, but it seems like a powerful deck to be coming out. There is one more Steel-type Pokemon, technically. It's normally not Steel, though, but it's a Terra-type Skeledirge. So Skeledirge, it's got the ability Incendiary Song. So once during your turn, you can discard a fire energy card from your hand to use this ability, and during your turn, your Pokemon's attack are going to do 60 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. That's just kind of busted. So you can be running it with things like Squovit VMAX, which when it takes a knockout, take extra prizes. You can be boosting up that damage. So instead of having to take out small basic Pokemon or already damaged Pokemon to get the extra prizes, you just go ditch a fire energy, ditch a fire energy, ditch a fire energy, do a big number, destroy something. That's pretty solid. You could also just be running it with Arceus V-Star is kind of the way I'm seeing it. You just pair these two together. Arceus V-Star only doing 200 damage normally, but if you have 2 Skeledirge in play, boost that by 120. Now you're doing 320 damage. Attach a Vitality Band on there, you're doing 330. You're taking out Stage 2 Pokemon EX in one shot. And Arceus is scoop-upable with Charon's Care and can charge up another Arceus, so you can just kind of loop into them constantly, and its V-Star power can help you set up the Skeledirges. That deck sounds scary. And the final Pokemon that seems like it'll be a new deck concept coming out of this set is Roaring Moon EX. So it's got the attack Frenzied Gouging. You get to just knock out your opponent's active Pokemon. If your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out, though, you put 200 damage onto this. It's got 230 damage, so you're not knocking yourself out. You are obviously in range to then be easily counter-knocked out by your opponent, but if you're able to just like deal with a VMAX in one shot, that's pretty solid, and you can definitely take control of games with this. I'm not 100% if this would be built fully as just like a deck centered around this, or you just kind of slot it into dark decks that are already running Dark Patch that can quickly just charge this up. You could even run it in Lost Box, just start including some dark energy in there. You could be running the Galarian Moltres in there as a single prize attacker for late game. Go Mirage Gate, get a dark and a something energy to attach to it, and then just manually attach a dark energy or use another Mirage Gate. This is online and can just delete something. Kind of terrifying. And that's it for the new decks that I think are going to be coming out of this set. And now on to the cards that are going to be great additions to already existing decks. So Miraidon EX is going to be getting a great addition in Tapu Koko EX. So its Revenging Shock attack is going to do a base damage of 30, but if any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack on your opponent's last turn, 90 more damage and paralyze your opponent. So a great way to kind of buy yourself a turn and put some decent damage into them. So 120, it's not massive, but then you go back into like another Miraidon and do 220. So all up, that's 340. You're knocking anything out. definitely a great option to be able to go into. It does have a second attack doing 180 damage. You have to discard an energy from this Pokemon, so it's not amazing. Like, you're running it with Miraidon. Miraidon does a bigger number. You probably have Raikou or Raichu still, so it's more so in there just to be able to paralyze things, not necessarily do massive damage. We're getting some great additions for Gardevoir EX, though, just in time, since, well, the single prize Gardevoir and Zacian V are going to be rotating probably like February, March, so you're going to need some other attackers for them. And that's where Mewtwo EX is going to come into play. It's a Terra-type Pokemon, so it can't be hit when it's on the bench. It's a Lightning type, can be hitting things like Palkia V-Star for weakness, Lugia V-Star for weakness, and it's a solid attacker because its Photon Kinesis is going to be doing a base damage 10, and then similar to that Gardevoir and Zacian we mentioned, scales up by 30 more damage for each Psychic Energy. But instead of attached to just this Pokemon, it's attached to all of your Pokemon. So it isn't a Psychic type. You can't be using Psychic Embrace to charge this up. You'd have to manually attach and then probably like an energy switch to get it online, which isn't too bad to be able to do. Or you could even be playing it with like Xatu to just get the energy directly to this. Xatu doesn't care if you're a Psychic type or not. Pretty cool concept there. But yeah, you can get to some pretty scary numbers. It does have another attack in Transcharge. You get to attach up to 2 basic Psychic Energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way that you'd like. Great attack to be able to use on your first turn. That's kind of something Gardevoir has always struggled with, is first turn of the game, it can't really do much. It's usually just, okay, use Zacian, ends my turn. But now you can be going, all right, there's already Psychic Energy in the discard. I can just chuck Mewtwo in the active and get some of it out, so I don't have to put as many damage counters out with my Gardevoir. Like, that's fine, and be charging up the Mewtwo, which is also fine. Do run the risk if it goes to your opponent's turn and then they knock you out. Might not always be the best play, but definitely a great option in some matchups. And that's not it for Gardevoir's new attackers. You're also going to be getting Screamtail, which has the Roaring Scream attack, doing 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each damage counter on this Pokemon. Has 90 health. We do have ways to scale that up with things like Bravery Charm and a new tool card that's coming out in this set. So Screamtail can be kind of getting up to some big bulky numbers, and that 20 damage isn't just to the active, it's to any of your opponent's Pokemon, so you can be sniping stuff off the bench too, which is pretty powerful. The other deck updates we're getting is basically just new basic Pokemon. Tinkaton EX, if you're a believer in that, there's a new Tinkatink that has Mountain Rummage. Look at the top card of your deck and you can put that card into your hand. If you don't, you just discard it and pick a different card. Tinkaton EX, you want a bunch of cards in your hand, so having a way to draw more cards is pretty solid. Also getting a new Toedscool that has the Sticky Spore attack. You get to attach a basic grass energy card from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon, so a great way to be setting up a secondary attacker. Once you evolve up into Toedscool EX, any of your Pokemon that have energy on them aren't affected by effects of your opponent's attacks, so getting energy spread around is very solid. It also means that there's an energy on this Toedscool, you can have an energy on another Toedscool, and then even if this gets knocked out, your other one is just an attachment away from being able to attack on the following turn, so you're in a pretty good spot. We're also getting a new Charcadet that's going to pair nicely with the new Armarouge EX we're getting, and just any existing Armarouge decks you were already running. It's got the attack Fiery Fighting Spirit. You search your deck for basic fire energy and attach it to this Pokemon. You then shuffle your deck afterwards. So it's a great way just to get more energy out for that Armarouge EX to get more damage online. Being in the active, it'll likely get knocked out, but if you're running it with those experience share as previously mentioned, this having 2 energy on it, 2 things on the bench having experience share, you're just keeping that energy in play and starting to set up damage. And the final one, I'm not 100% if I should have this as like a deck update. I see it having potential as a deck update though, being Altaria EX for Goodra V-Star. So its ability Humming Heal lets you heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon once per turn. Goodra obviously taking less damage. It's a great addition for that. Also decks that are using the Slowbro engine, where Slowbro can take damage counters from your damage active Pokemon and put it onto it. You can be running that with Altaria and then heal off those damage counters, so then you can move more damage counters off onto it. It's pretty solid. Its attack too isn't too bad. Being a water and a steel energy, that's kind of why I'm thinking it would go with Goodra, because you're going to be running that with it already. It does 140 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, prevent all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to this Pokemon. So if they're trying to poison you, paralyze you, confuse you, knock you out, not with damage, just straight up saying, hey, you're knocked out, like Star Requiem does and Roaring Moon does, you won't be impacted by that with Altaria EX. And next we're going to be covering the cards that I think are definitely worth adding to your collection. They're not necessarily staples, but will be great tech cards to add to your decks. Professor Sada's Vitality? I'm probably saying that wrong. But you get to choose up to 2 of your ancient Pokemon and attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to each of them and then draw 3 cards. So it's a great way to be able to do some energy acceleration as well as draw power. It is limited to just ancient Pokemon, but there's some pretty cool ancient Pokemon that we're seeing, and I'm sure we're going to be getting some more as more sets come out. So it's one of those cards that should only get stronger the longer it's in rotation. Also going to recommend picking up 2 copies of Mela. It's sort of reminiscent of Raihan. So if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your last turn, you can play this card. You're going to attach a basic fire energy card from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon, and if you do, you get to draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. So energy acceleration and draw power is definitely solid. Being able to use it with fire type but not limited to just fire type Pokemon, like fire energy, you can be running it in colorless decks. Gives you some draw power. It's definitely an interesting option. We were talking about that Scaly Dirge with Arceus earlier. You could be running this in there. Be a cool concept. Also recommend picking up probably 2 copies of Tulip. So it's similar to the card Nessa we used to have, where you could get 4 in any combination of water and water energy Pokemon from your discard pile and put them into your hand, but this is going to do it with psychic Pokemon. So it's a pretty solid card. You can be running it obviously with Gardevoir. Xatu will be seeing play with this, I'm sure. Definitely a good one to have. Probably 2 copies is more than enough. You'd likely only run 1, but maybe 2 copies to be safe. I don't see it being a very expensive card, so it shouldn't be breaking the bank. Final supporter card, I'm going to recommend everybody picks up probably 2 copies of Larry. You get to flip a coin. If it's heads, search your deck for up to 2 Pokemon and put them into your hand. So any Pokemon, evolutions, basic, they're yours. If it's tails though, you get to search your deck for a basic Pokemon and put it into your hand. So sort of like capturing Aroma, but on a supporter, you do have the potential to get 2 cards though. Obviously, it's not like a great effect. If you fail it, it's not great. But just look at him, he's Larry. 2 copies of Larry. The next cards we're going to cover is the new Paradox item cards we're seeing. Well, tool cards, I guess, technically. So Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. You can attach it to an ancient Pokemon, and it gives it 60 extra health. Plus, it recovers from all special conditions and can't be affected by any anymore. So pretty solid. You can put it on that Screamtail, give it extra health, get more damage counters on it, do more numbers. That's pretty great, and you can put it on any other ancient Pokemon if you want as well. We're also seeing Future Booster Energy Capsule, a tool card for future Pokemon. So if this is attached to a future Pokemon, it has no retreat cost, and the attacks it uses do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, making Iron Hands stronger, which is healthy for the format, I'm sure somebody thought. And it means that Iron-Valiant can be pivoting it around for free. Like it can just do free retreat, then you switch, then you attach jet energy. You can be bouncing them around all over the place and scaring people, putting damage counters out. It's a really cool card. The other future item card we're seeing is Techno Radar. You have to discard a card from your hand to use this card, but you get to search your deck for 2 future Pokemon cards. Reveal them, put them into your hand, and then shuffle your deck. So it's your way of getting into Iron Hands, it's your way of getting into your Iron Valiants. It's pretty powerful. Having dedicated search for this is, yeah, great. Like seeing Archetypes get this kind of support in one set is always very exciting. So like Battle Styles did it with Rapid Strike and Single Strike. This doing it with Ancient and Future Pokemon. We're seeing a lot of support for them so far, which is good. And hopefully we see it continue into next year. And it's not just like a one and done gimmick with this set. And we're seeing the return of Pokemon Doll cards with Snorlax Doll. So you can only play this card if it's in your hand when you're setting up the game, you put it face down, and then it's effectively 120 HP colorless basic Pokemon. At any time you can just choose to discard it, and if your opponent ever knocks it out, they don't take any prize cards for it. It's interesting. The fact that it needs to be in your opening hand, similar to like Battle VIP Pass, means you'd likely be needing to run it as high counts, so if you're a fan of control style decks, you'd be wanting to pick up 4 copies of this card. Get multiples of them, put multiples of them in play your first turn, and then you can't put them in play ever again. Definitely very limited, especially since it's only when you're setting up the game. So even on your first turn, if you're going second, you use Research, you get into 7 more cards, you use Squawkbilly, you get into 6 more cards. If you're seeing multiple Snorlax Dolls, it's irrelevant. It needs to be in that first 7 cards that you're seeing when you're setting up during the game. Or if you take mulligans, I think that's still counted as setup. I would confirm it with a judge, but you get to take those extra cards from the mulligans and it's still all your Pokemon are face down. You can put this face down as one of those Pokemon. We're also getting a new special energy in this set, being Medical Energy. When you attach this from your hand to one of your Pokemon, you heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. Definitely an interesting concept. It counts as colorless energy, so you can kind of splash it into a number of decks. Healing a little bit, keeping yourself out of breakpoint numbers can be pretty big, so I'd recommend picking up 4 copies of this. Special energies, it's normally one of those things I just recommend get a playset. You never know when it's going to be like, hey, I want to run Blissey V again and just like attach these and heal a bit. Sure, cool, go for it. Into Lugia V-Star though, this isn't like a great energy. You can still technically accelerate it from the deck because it is a special energy, but it's only when it's played from your hand onto Pokemon that it's going to be doing that healing. So keep that in mind. And into the tool cards. I know we did technically cover the ancient and future ones before, but I was trying to do all the ancient and future stuff all in one go and didn't really want to break them up. So now back to the tool cards. If that bugs your OCD, I apologize in advance. The first one we're going to talk about though is Luxurious Cape. So if the Pokemon this is attached to does not have a rule box, it gets an extra 100 health. When it's knocked out though, it is going to give up an extra prize card. So you're effectively turning your single prize Pokemon into double prize Pokemon, but making them bulkier. Like imagine a Torterra that has 290 HP. It's not getting knocked out by Giratina V-Star. Kind of busted. I'm for it. We're also seeing a new kind of counterplay tool card being Defiance Vest. If you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, the Pokemon this is attached to takes 40 less damage from attacks. So it's a bit of a comeback card. You need to be behind. Similar to Defiance Band that does extra damage, this means you take less damage and actually counters Defiance Band because that does an extra 30 damage. This takes 40 less. So you're still taking 10 less even if they're running a Defiance Band, but you wouldn't be because you can't both be behind on prizes. So this is a redundant sentence, and hopefully I remember to edit this out of the video. There's also a very interesting new mechanic coming into the game in TMs. So we're seeing 4 new TM cards that are added in this set. You can attach it as a tool card to a Pokemon. It gives it a new attack, and at the end of your turn, you do discard that tool from that Pokemon. So then you can attach a different tool on your next turn. And the first one we're going to talk about is Turbo Energize. A very interesting card. 1 colorless energy. You can search your deck for 2 basic energy cards and attach them to your bench Pokemon in any way that you like. So you can be setting up some bench guys. A lot of decks don't have a great attacker the first turn of the game. So being able to use this and be able to go, hey, now I have an attack I can use on the first turn, and it's helping set up my attacks for the second and third turns of the game. Definitely really cool. So pretty keen to see what people can come up with this. It's like a budget Arceus V-Star attack, but for 1 energy. I like it. Also getting Blindside. It's going to cost 3 colorless energy to use this. It does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon with any damage counters already on it. So if you're like partially hitting into something and then they try and run to the bench and don't have Manaphy and you want to finish it off, this is a great card to be able to use. Technical Machines Devolution and Evolution are also really interesting ones, both costing 1 colorless energy. Evolution, letting you choose up to 2 of your bench Pokemon, search your deck for a card that evolves from those Pokemon, and, well, evolve them up. So another one that for 1 colorless energy, on your first turn of the game, you can be evolving your bench guys, and then coming into your next turn, because they were evolved at the end of your previous turn, you can evolve them again. So Gardevoir can all of a sudden be going, all right, I have a Ralts in the active, evolve up 2 Ralts on the bench into Curlias, back into their next turn, those Curlias can discard, draw them cards, and then evolve into Gardevoirs right away. It's a little bit scary. But Devolution, on the other hand, for 1 colorless energy, you devolve all of your opponent's evolved Pokemon, putting the highest stage evolution card from them back into their hand. But instead of just 2, which the evolution's doing, you're hitting everything. So if they've used rare candies to get into stage 2 Pokemon, you're going, that's neat. I hope you have the stage 1 or another rare candy, because we're going to undo that. It's pretty solid and definitely seems like a great card for a number of decks, like Charizard EX. It's a pretty powerful thing. Excalibur, pretty powerful. Both very reliant on rare candy. So if they use them and you go, that's cool, do what you need to do in 1 turn, because I'm about to end your career. They're definitely going to have to rethink how decks are built if this card starts seeing play in a number of decks. Some other cards I'm going to recommend everybody picks up, mostly just based off of what I said there, where a lot of decks don't have a great attacker first turn of the game. These are cards that can be great attackers for a number of decks, well, first turn of the game. There being Chin-Pao, Chu-Yu, Ting-Lu, and Wu-Chen, all having very similar attacks, costing 1 energy of their type. You get to attach up to 2 energy of their type from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. So it's just a great way to accelerate energy out to Grass Pokemon, Fire Pokemon, Fighting Pokemon, or Water Pokemon. So I'd recommend picking up 1 to 2 of each of these, because you never know when you need that extra little bit of a boost and to get going. Obviously, you could just be running that TM Energize that does the same thing, but finding Pokemon and getting them into the active is a little bit easier than finding a tool. Like having this as a 1 or 2 off and being able to go, all right, Nest Ball, switch into it, attach energy, go, It's pretty solid. And needing to find that tool card, if you're not running the stadium to help you find that tool card or just fully reliant on drawing into it, it can be a little bit trickier. So these are just alternatives to running that. There's a new Garganical that I think is going to be really interesting for a number of decks and creates a new energy acceleration engine for fighting types. So once during your turn, you may attach a basic fighting energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon, and you get to heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. So it's not limited to just fighting types. You could be running this with things that do use colorless energy as well. Being able to heal them is pretty solid. Plus, there's a number of other Garganicals we already have. One that heals between turns. I think it's heals 20 from all your guys between turns. So going into your opponent's turn and then coming back to your turn. Being able to run that Garganical and this one. And I believe we're getting an EX soon. I'm pretty keen for it. And it's always good to have other energy acceleration. Like Gardevoir being able to accelerate for Psychic. Excalibur for water. We have Cherim for grass, and now we've got Garganical for fighting. So that's pretty solid. And another interesting fighting Pokemon being Sandy Shock's EX coming out in this set with the ability Magnetic Attraction. This ability can only be used once during your turn, and if your opponent has 4 or fewer prizes remaining. But you get to attach a fighting energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. So it's a great Pokemon to kind of just have sitting on your bench to be like, you knocked out one of my guys, I'm going to slowly charge this up turn after turn and eventually just hit you with it. So it's a nice threat to be able to have on your back end of the board. So decks like Tinglu, it does like pretty good damage, but you're half hitting into things. And it's like, well, if you knock out my Tinglu, I just go into Sandy Shocks and bop you. Or even just like charge up Sandy Shocks and then Thornton into something and you've got energy out that way. So interesting card to have. And I'd say probably pick up 2 copies of this because you never know when fighting types are going to make that triumphant comeback and find their way back on the top. Also going to be including Iron-Valiant in here. It is going to come up later in the video in the deck-specific cards, but I think probably everyone should have at least 1 or 2 copies of this card. It's a great way to fix up some numbers with its ability Tachyon Bits. When it goes from your bench into the active spot, you get to put 2 damage counters on any of your opponent's Pokemon, so it helps you fix up numbers and can get you some pretty cheeky knockouts. The fact that it's when it comes from the bench into the active too means that if you're using something that bounces into it, when you bounce into this, your turn isn't effectively over yet. You're still going through the effects of everything. So you bounce to the bench, this comes to the active, you can choose to put 2 damage counters on something and do some pretty cheeky plays that way. Bombardier EX, which I think everyone should be picking up at least 1 or 2 copies of. It's sort of like Battle VIP Pass, but as a Pokemon. So if you go first, you can actually choose to use this attack on your first turn. Search your deck for up to 3 basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. It's a great way to get your bench set up, and it's an attack you can use going first, which normally you can't do. So being able to go Nest Ball, switch into this, establish your bench, or start this, attach, establish your bench, you're in a pretty good way. Battle VIP Pass will be rotating soon, so the format's likely to slow down a bit. So having a way to kind of keep that pressure with Bombardier EX, it's an interesting one. Doesn't have a lot of health, 200 HP, so it's not too big, but you're using this on your first turn. It goes to your opponent's first turn when they can attack. There's not a lot of things that can do 200 damage on the first turn of the game, so you should be fine. Iron-Jugulus being another card that seems like it could be an interesting tech for a lot of decks. Its attack costs 3 colorless energy, so anything that can accelerate any kind of energy, you can just splash this in there. Excalibur, Fluffy, Xatu. Yeah, you can charge this up. It's going to do 50 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon that already have damage counters on them, so a great way to kind of finish things off. It's pretty cool. I like it. Also seeing Brute Bonnet coming out as an ancient Pokemon in this set with the Toxic Powder ability. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon has Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached to it, make both active Pokemon poisoned. So a great way to be able to do some additional chip damage and put pressure onto your opponent. Does poison you as well, so if you're running something that evolves, you use this before you evolve, you remove that status condition, or there might even be some cards that do want status conditions attached to them to be able to do some extra damage, like the new Clump we're getting out of this set. Not going to be covering it because it seems like it's got rogue potential, but like, I don't know, it's like pretty big rogue potential. I may be including some other rogue decks that it's also like, why are these on there? But I don't know, Clump seems like a bit of a stretch. And for the final card, I think that everybody should try and pick up. It's going to be Oricorio. So it's got the attack Pep Up. You shuffle your hand into your deck and then draw a card for each bench Pokemon, yours and your opponent's. It's another one of those things that first turn of the game, there's not a lot of great attacking options, so if you need something just to give yourself some additional support and setup, Oricorio isn't a bad idea. For each bench Pokemon, so if your opponent send up their bench to 4 or 5, you've set yours up to 4 or 5, you can be drawing into 10 cards. It basically forces them to go, well, Iono me, or I keep 10 cards. And even if they Iono you first turn of the game, this gives you a different 6, so you're in a fine spot. Definitely an interesting card. Probably just going to be like a 10-cent thing, to be honest, and that's why I've kind of included it on here, is it could come up, so I'd recommend having it just in case. And next we're going to get into the cards that I think like have potential, maybe not immediate meta impact, but I could definitely see these coming up. I'm not going to say rush out and buy these. I know this is effectively a buy list video, but these are more so the cards that if you pull them from a pack, hang on to them. And if you're looking to buy everything in this set that has potential, pick these up as well. So Altaria EX, 4 copies of this. If you pull them, keep them. Once during your turn, you can heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. So 4 of these in play, you can be healing 80 damage off all your Pokemon. Theoretically, that's just a deck in and of itself. Its attack too, for a water and a steel energy, doing 140 damage and making it immune to effects from your opponent's attack. That's pretty good. And then if you have multiple Z's in play, every turn you're just kind of healing things off. They're not able to affect you, like paralyze you, confuse you, knock you out. Looking at you, Giratina V-Star. It's an interesting one. Hoopa EX also seeming like one of those cards that if you happen to pull it, keeping it just as a tech wouldn't be the worst idea. It's a Terra type dark, well, it's a dark Pokemon that's a Terra type as a fighting Pokemon. So you use dark energy to pay the attack cost, and it does 50 damage for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon in play. So if they've got 6 energy in play, you're doing 300 damage. Use a Grant because it's a fighting type, 330. You're taking out Stage 2 EX Pokemon. That's not too bad. 6 energy in play though, it's a lot. But there is decks that are running that many, like Gardevoir EX, they'd be putting that many out, but you have dark energy, so you probably have dark Pokemon, you're just knocking them out with your other attackers. Yeah, like I don't think it's the most optimal thing, but I could definitely see it potentially coming up. Like it could be a great attacker into Lugia V-Star, for example. It could help out into Arceus decks, Miraidon. There's definitely some spots where it's like this card does have like a niche that it could fill, but I'm not 100% that you need to buy it. If you pull it from a pack though, like hang on to it because you never know. Absol with the draw awareness. You may discard any number of cards from your hand, then draw a card until you have 5 cards in your hand. So it's another one of those things that like start of the game, if you need something as an option, this isn't a bad call. Its attack Enhanced Blade does 20 damage as a base, and if this Pokemon has a tool attached to it, 60 more damage, bringing it up to 80, 2 colorless energy. So it's, yeah, if you have it in here for that first attack, it can use the second attack for colorless energy, so it's splashable into decks. If you pull it from packs, hanging on to one as a tech, there's potential, but that's like I wouldn't recommend buying it necessarily. The Purloin and Liepard, on the other hand, though, they've definitely got potential. Like maybe pick these up. If you pull them, definitely keep them because its attack Dishonest Swap moves all damage counters from one of your bench Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon for just 1 dark energy. So if you're tanking some hits, you can just be healing that damage off effectively and putting it onto your opponent. That's pretty great. Also getting an interesting Crobat that has a control type attack. So for 2 colorless energy, it does 50 damage. You get to choose items or supporters. And then your opponent can't choose to use those on their turn. So it's an effective way to supporter or item lock things. There's already some great item lock decks though, being Venomoth and the new Banette EX deck that saw recent success. Well, it's not, Banette EX isn't new, but the deck being successful is new. So I feel like there's better options, but Crobat's definitely an interesting concept to kind of keep your eye on. So if you pull them, maybe hang on to these because some control player might find a way to crack the system. But for right now, I wouldn't say necessarily buy it. Hang on to them though. The Nickit and Thievul line also being interesting ones. Once during your turn, when you play this card from your hand to evolve your Pokemon, you can look at your opponent's hand, choose 2 energy cards you find there, and have your opponent shuffle them into your deck. So another one of those control type cards. It seems like Dark type's kind of heading in that direction, which is very interesting. 2 new basic psychic type attackers, being Latios as the first one, having Luster Purge, 180 damage, discard 3 energy from this Pokemon. A quick attacker you can set up that can do a number that you can just boss up a Luminion and take 2 prizes. That's not bad. Chuck it into Gardevoir. It's an easy one just to go, oh, like they think you don't have another attacker, and then just pop, Latios comes out of nowhere and does some decent damage. Deoxys, similar thing, 120 damage for 3 psychic energy. You move all energy attached to this Pokemon to your bench Pokemon in any way that you like though. So less damage, but you're getting to keep the energy in play, which is interesting. Some interesting water type abilities coming out in this set too. The first one being Milotic, that, yeah, if you pull it, I'd definitely recommend hanging on to this one. And you know what, if it's like $1 or less, pick it up too. Its ability Lifeboat, when you evolve into this Pokemon, each player puts a basic Pokemon from their discard pile onto the bench. So if you want to kind of disrupt your opponent and fill their bench, like if you know that, oh, they discarded a Pumpkaboo or something, they didn't want to use it, they just wanted to use it as Ultra Ball fodder, they don't need it in the matchup, too bad, now it's taking up a spot. And it lets you get something back from the discard. There will obviously be times where you're helping out your opponent though, so I'm not sure that it'll become like a staple, but it's definitely got some potential. Octillery, similar thing for this, so if you pull it, probably hang on to it. Its ability Suction Draw, once during your turn, when you evolve into this, you can draw 3 cards. It's interesting, but I feel like it would be better if we had Scoop Up Net still in rotation. So just like evolve into it, draw 3 cards, Scoop Up Net, evolve another one, draw 3 more. It'd be pretty cool. Like there is obviously the Rapid Strike Octillery that's seeing play in decks currently. So if you were on to run this as a one-off maybe, like just to get some more dig potential in those decks, okay, but that Octillery is repeatable, so I feel like it's just better while it's in rotation. But this is definitely an interesting one to kind of keep your eye on. And an interesting basic water attacker that could be kind of helpful into like Excalibur decks being Palkia. So it has Teleportation Burst, 30 damage. You can switch it from the active with one of your bench Pokemon. That's all right. Like you could be going into Mimikyus or Diancies and things like that. Like it could be a hit and run kind of card, but the attack I'm kind of eyeing up here is prize count. So it does 80 damage, and if you have more prizes remaining than your opponent, 80 more. So a very quick Pokemon to charge up, doing 160 damage in a single prize matchup could help you out. Obviously you have Excalibur that could just be attacking as itself, so like into Lost Box, go with a single prizer into it. It's kind of why I'm thinking Palkia. Like it's outside of range of Sableye, it's outside of range of Cramorant. If you pull it, maybe hang on to it, but I'm not sure that you need to run out and buy this one. The final water type Pokemon being Wugtrio. Having the ability Ad Hoc Choice, when you play this from your hand to evolve, you can search your deck for 3 Pokemon tool cards and put them into your hand. We've got other ways to search out tools, but having another one isn't a bad thing. Like getting 3 decks like Reverum EX that want multiple, maybe you sneak this in there as a 1/1 line. Like it's not the worst call, but I feel like there's better options. We've got a Stadium that searches tools. We've got an item that lets you dig for tools. But having another way to get into them, like it's always good to have some experimentation. So if you pull it, maybe hang on to this one, but I don't necessarily see it being competitively viable. Same goes for the Zacian. Having Iron Howl does 30 damage for 1 Steel Energy. You get to attach a Steel Energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. It's a great one of those attacks that it helps you set up early game, so it isn't too bad. And the second attack doing 130 damage. During your next turn, it can't attack though, but 130, like it seems fine and could help out in the Lost Box matchup. Being outside of range of Cramorant, Sableye could be putting pings on this to knock it out though. There's also a Steelix coming out in this set that has an attack for just 1 Steel Energy. It does 130 damage, so that's pretty solid. It does do 30 damage to each of your bench Pokemon though, but there is Pokemon that scale up by having damage on them, so it seems like there may be an interesting deck concept to come out of that. This one though seems very rogue though, like very off meta, kind of just one of those fun shenanigans decks. So if you're into that, if you pull it, hang on to them because there is some potential there, but I wouldn't say this is something you're going to like sleeve up and bring to a regional. So that's why I've kind of given it an honorable mention on here, is like, if you pull it, sure. Volcanion, similar to the Zacian, being able to do a little bit of damage to the active, choose 2 of your bench Pokemon and attach a basic Fire Energy card from your discard pile to each of them. It's a great way to do some setup. We do have that tool card though that lets you do a similar thing with Energize. But for fighting or for fire decks, it's not a bad option. Maybe for GLC, but I feel like GLC we already have a better Volcanion option, but it's something to keep an eye on. Iron Moss being another one of those cards. If you pull it, I'd recommend hanging on to it. This one, actually picking up one off of it, like if it's $1 or $2, wouldn't be a bad call either, since its ability Thermal Reactor. Once during your turn, when this Pokemon moves from your bench to the active spot, you can move any number of fire energy from your other Pokemon onto it. It's then going to be able to use Heat Ray for 2 fire and a colorless to do 120 to the active. During your next turn though, you can't use Heat Ray again, so you could attach a TM and use one of those instead if you want to attack, or just switch it out. But it's a great option to be able to use into like Charizard EX or other fire decks for the Lost Box matchup. Having 130 HP, it's outside of Sableye range, it's outside of Cramorant range, and it can be knocking both those things out. Obviously, Greninja being able to hit this for weakness, it would get knocked out by that, and doing 120 damage, Greninja has 130 HP, you're outside of knocking them out, so they do have a counter for you, but it could be an interesting option to include. Also recommend hanging on to a copy of Magby if you pull one. The baby Pokemon are all kind of interesting. They've got free retreat, they got 30 HP, and they have a free attack. Magby's is Gradual Heater. During your opponent's next turn, if this Pokemon is damaged by an attack, even if it gets knocked out, put 6 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So an interesting way to put like a little bit of chip damage out without having to commit energy to it while you're setting up something else. Probably not going to see play, but they're always interesting ones that if you happen to pull it, I'd say hang on to it just in case. Minun and Plusle combo is coming out of this. So the Plusle, it's fine, does 10 damage and 10 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon already. But the Minun is the interesting bit. You do have to have both these in play though. Any Plusle will do though. But if you have Plusle in play, whenever your opponent attaches a energy card from their hand to one of their Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. Can't apply more than 1 Buddy Pulse ability at a time though. So it's not like you could have 1 Plusle and 4 Minuns and be putting 80 damage out every single time, because that'd be a little bit cracked, but it's definitely an interesting way to put some chip damage. It does take up 2 bench space. I'm a little bit hesitant to say go and buy these. They do have 70 HP, so Greninja could be taking out both of them at the same time, but it's definitely an interesting concept, and if you pull them, hanging on to them isn't the worst idea. Same goes for the Toedscruel in this set. Probably keep 1 copy of this card if you pull it, because its ability Mycelium Colony. Cards in your opponent's discard pile can't be put into their hand through the effects of trainer cards or abilities they use. So it blocks Superior Energy Retrieval, it blocks Clara, it blocks Energy Retrieval, it blocks a number of things, which is pretty solid. So definitely having it as a one-off is a cool idea. Zoroark will be rotating, so it's not like a tech you can kind of slip into those decks. Toedscruel and Toedscruel EX is a deck in and of itself, so if you start running that, this is a great one to have for that. And Toedscruel EX being able to block effects if you've got energy, like maybe it starts becoming like a 1/1 line of the basic, the EX, and then also this, just to go, hey, depending on the matchup, I have an answer, but then that's 3 deck space you're giving up. So if you pull it, I'd recommend keeping it, or if you play Toedscruel EX, then yeah, pick this up. Porygon Z is another interesting card coming out in this set with the ability Bug Turbo. Once during your turn, you can flip a coin. If it's heads, choose up to 4 basic energy cards from your discard pile and attach them to this Pokemon. If it's tails, you discard an energy from this Pokemon. But if this doesn't have any energy on it, you're not having to discard anything, because you can't. This seems like a great option for decks that are going to be doing scaling damage based off energy. So for example, Baxcalibur with Chin-Pao. Chin-Pao can discard energy from any of your Pokemon. You're already running Rare Candy to get into the Baxcalibur, so having a 1/1 Porygon Z line wouldn't really be breaking too much. And then if you go into this, it's basically a coin flip to go, it's a superior energy retrieval without having to discard cards from my hand. So instead of discarding 2 cards from your hand, you've given up 2 deck space for a 1/1 line of this that's repeatable turn after turn after turn. It is a coin flip, so it's like a bit of a Hail Mary thing, but when it hits, that'd be pretty epic. Same with like that Mewtwo EX we saw, doing extra damage based off psychic energy on all of your Pokemon. Having a 1/1 Porygon Z in that, you've already got 3 Rare Candy. Get 4 energy from the discard without having to put damage counters out with Gardevoir EX. Interesting. It does also have an attack, Energy Attack, does 40 damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon. So even if you did hit heads on this though, that's just 160 damage. You'd have to be using it like a few turns after turns to get up to relevant numbers. It's not bad. Like 2 turns in a row, you could get up to, what's that, 320, attach another one, you're doing 360. It can be one-shotting stage 2 EX Pokemon, but that's with 9 energy attached to it, and that's a big commitment. Don't worry, I didn't forget about GLC. There's a lot of interesting new cards for that. Some we've already covered, so we'll kind of skim past them. The legendary Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet, the Chuyu, Wu-Chen, Chin-Pao, and Ting-Lu, all those I think do have potential for GLC, so they will be on here. So into the first one that's, well, not one of those, since Chuyu and Wu-Chen are going to start us off, we're going to be talking about Crustle. So Crustle has the attack Crag Bash. It does 100 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, this takes 100 less damage from attacks from evolution Pokemon. It's a stage 1 Pokemon, so you could be running it with Rigid Band to give it another reduction of 30 damage, so it takes 130 less damage from attacks. Definitely an interesting card you could be putting into grass-type decks. The Garganacl we already talked about being a great fighting energy acceleration option for GLC decks. It's pretty cool, being able to heal some damage. Fighting Pokemon, they got some big bulky basics. Run them with like Cape of Toughness or Bravery Charm, make them bulkier, tank some hits, Garganacl, get some energy, heal those hits off. It'd be pretty cool. The Chin-Pao and Palkia and Iron Bundle we already talked about for water types, but then we are also seeing Veluza. which seems like a great attacking option for water decks in GLC. Unfortunately, not so much for standard. It's got an ability cut for the job. If this Pokemon's in the active spot and is knocked out by damage from an attack, you get to move 2 water energy from this to one of your bench Pokemon. So you can be committing a lot of energy for it to be charging up its attack Hydro Pump, which is going to be doing 60 damage and 20 more damage for each water energy attached to this Pokemon, to be doing some pretty massive numbers, and even when it gets knocked out, you can keep that in play for your next Pokemon. Water type decks, a lot of them do kind of have these Hydro Pump style attacks where it's how much water energy does it have on it? Cool, I do a massive number now, and we've got cards to charge it up like Frostmoth and Deluge Blastoise and Baxcalibur, so it definitely seems like a great option for those decks, especially since it's a basic Pokemon, it's easy to get set up, and can be repeatable by using something like Nessa or Rescue Stretcher to just get it back, put it right back out, charge it up again. It's pretty cool. The Psychic type Pokemon, we have talked about them all, being Latios, the Xatu line, and the Deoxys. Xatu seems like a great addition for Psychic decks, adding some draw power and energy acceleration, and Deoxys and Latios seem like some great basic attackers to be able to sprinkle into decks. For Lightning types though, we haven't really talked about any of these. We're getting a new Zekrom. We already have some pretty solid Zekroms, and this one's keeping on par with them. Has 130 HP, like the other ones, does 130 damage, like the other ones, but this attack does 40 damage to one of your bench Pokemon instead of to itself, which is what the current ones do. They do damage to themselves and they paralyze, so that's pretty solid. But if you're using it as just an attacker, this one being able to put damage on the bench instead of onto itself to be able to repeat attack and not easily get knocked out, it's definitely one to keep your eye on. I feel like the other one though, being able to paralyze, is still probably the better option, but this is definitely one that having a copy of it to kind of play around with and experiment, it's not a bad call. The Galvantula line though, I'm very excited about, since Lightning decks seem like they do have some spread potential in GLC, and Electro Bullet is just going to add to that, being 1 Lightning energy to use, 50 damage to the active, and then 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. There's already things that do some spread, like Tapu Koko, we've got Electivire that does, and then this just being another addition to be able to put in there as another attacker. It's definitely a cool one to keep an eye on. They are kind of tight for space though, so I'm not too sure that it'll be bumping anything out, but having it as a 1/1 line just to experiment with isn't a bad call. Also, that new Oricorio we talked about, it's effectively like a copy of Colress as an attack, so having that for GLC is pretty solid. And the trainer cards, we've gone over all of these before. I've recommended picking them up for the standard format, so if you play GLC, probably just pick up an extra copy of every single one of those for, well, the GLC format. Earthen Vessel being another energy search option that can be put into any type of deck is great. Mela being effectively a Raihan draw power card for fire type decks is amazing. And Psychic getting their own copy of Nessa effectively with Tulip is pretty solid. The Professor being able to just scoop up a Pokemon, you can sprinkle that into any deck that's going to be tanking some hits. So Steel and Fighting types, they're usually pretty bulky. Having this option for them is an interesting inclusion. Luxurious Cape, making your Pokemon that are already pretty bulky even bulkier, does turn a single prize format into a 2-prize format briefly though, so that's an interesting take to have in GLC, but can definitely get you out of some of those breakpoint numbers and be a great inclusion to have. Same with Defiance Fest. It's a single prize format, so there'll be a lot of I take a prize, you take a prize, I take a prize, you take a prize, so having one of those turns where it's like I take a prize, but I was behind, and then it goes to them, and then you're just outside of their knockout range by taking 40 less damage. Not a bad call. And then the TMs all seeming like very interesting cards for GLC. You'll notice I haven't included the Devolution TM on here though. So for standard, I think it's great because if you can use it into a deck that's heavily reliant on rare candy, they're in a tough spot. The fact though that you're just putting those evolution Pokemon back into their hand and then they put it back out, for GLC, I'm not sure that it's going to be that disruptive. It's definitely disruptive because if you're manually evolving, like if they're basics, they manually evolve to a stage 1, you bump them back, then they manually have to evolve to a stage 1 again. Like it's buying you a bit of time. So it's not a bad inclusion, but I feel like it really shines when they've used rare candies and you can go, cool, you can't get back into that. GLC, you can only run 1 copy of rare candy, so you're not getting that playoff very often. But yeah, bumping them back 1 stage and buying a turn, it's not a bad call. But I feel like it doesn't shine as much in GLC. I could be wrong. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you play GLC fairly consistently? You think Devolution is going to make an impact on it? The Evolution one, 100%. Like being able to skip up, go from a basic to a stage 1, and then the next turn immediately into stage 2. That's big. And I guess the Devolution one to kind of counter that. It should probably be on here. I'll be honest, I probably should have put it on here. That's it for the cards that I think are worth picking up for the Paradox Rift format, though. So for all the ones that I talked about, they'll be popping up on the screen here. There was a handful, though, that I said, like, if you pulled them from packs, hang on to them. Also, some of these I do have a bit of a mixed view on, but it's if you're wanting every single card that seems like it's got potential, this is the list I would recommend going for. If you're more so on the budget mindset and like, I only want the cards that I specifically need, 100% just go for the ones that you're after. Like if there's decks that catch your eye, those are the ones to go for. And these are the cards that I'm personally going to be picking up. So it's a little bit thinner. You'll notice there is some deck types that are entirely cut out, like Serena. It's an interesting card, but personally, it doesn't really fit my playstyle, and I don't think I'd be picking it up. A number of these being cards that I think are probably just going to be like 50 cents to $1 and could see play. I'm going to pick them up just because of that, like the Chin Pao, the Wu Chen, the Chuyu, the Tinglu. They all seem like they do have potential. It won't be immediate, but the format should be slowing down once rotation hits. And I think having options like that to get some energy out and get set up is a great play to be able to go into. So it's having those, I think there is deck potential for them in the future. What are your thoughts on Paradox Rift, though? Do you already have a buy list in mind? And do you think I've skimmed over some cards here or included some that definitely shouldn't be on a list? Like, I don't know, am I coming kind of out of left field with the Natu Zatu? I think they're going to be good. I could be completely wrong, though. We're all human. We make mistakes, but these are my recommendations for Paradox Rift. Till next time, though, take care of yourselves.